We're going to be talking about quite a lot of things today, but before I get into everything, I just want to give you just a quick background about myself. I'm currently a member of the Technology Council at Forbes Magazine, where I cover digital marketing. And I get a lot of questions from coaches, consultants around how to grow their brand, how to grow their credibility. So I put this presentation together a bit more as a resource tool for anyone that's interested in achieving more influence online. I'm also CEO of a company called Roosterly, where we manage brands for executives globally. So I've got a little bit of a background that I can share with you on what generally tends to work and not work. And ultimately, my focus is, if I provide you nothing else, I'll share with you all the mistakes that I made so you don't have to go through all of those sorts of trials and tribulations of growing your social media presence in a long, drawn out, tumultuous way. I can share with you quicker, more effective ways to grow your brand, generate leads, make more money utilizing social platforms. Now, I say this half jokingly, but one of the disclaimers I like to make is don't use these powers that I'm going to share with you for evil. So what I mean when I say that is I work with a lot of executives that ultimately, once they get a general feel for using LinkedIn, they become sort of addicted, and they'll spend, in some cases, this one guy who's spending about 4 hours a day on LinkedIn stalking everyone that he's ever worked with. And that's really not my intention, is to have you spend hours and hours on social media. I want you to use these tools that you have to efficiently communicate, effectively develop leads quickly, and begin sort of growing your practice, right? So take that into account. Another thing that I wanted to share with you is later on in this presentation, I share a story about how when I first launched my first business back in 2010, I just started being more active on social media, and I generated about $260,000 via a lead that came in, which was at the time a windfall. And so that really got me hooked on how to generate revenue on social media and what we could do, as a small company without spending a lot of money to generate income. At that type of margin, it was really, really great. Another thing is, the first step is really focusing on building some credibility and visibility, not generally right out of the gate, trying to generate leads, but first, getting comfortable with your audience, getting comfortable with sharing quality content, and ultimately staying in front of your audience, right? I really wanted to find the right types of clients. There's a lot of people on social media, specifically LinkedIn, with a variety of different backgrounds, okay? And when you don't focus on who your clients are, it affects how you approach your social media strategy, right? But ultimately, if you narrow it down and focus on what you really want to get out of it, like in my case, my focus was, if I could connect with 25 people a week and get 2 engagements at the end of the month, I will have achieved my goals, right? Just kept it down to just very fundamental numbers that I could manage, right? And ultimately, after really refining the process, right now, each person on our team, we've got about 3 salespeople now. They're generating about 2 to 5 leads per week, inbound leads, by doing content marketing and some of the things that I'm going to show you here on social media, specifically LinkedIn. So our goal today, and what I want to share with you, is, if you're an independent consultant, right, and you're not utilizing LinkedIn to its full potential, there's some basic fundamental things that you can do in terms of how you approach your social media presence and how you build your social media presence that can lead to good things. And like I said earlier, my focus is, if I can share with you all the things that I learned the hard way through making a lot of mistakes, then in that case, once I share those with you, you will ultimately save quite a bit of time. So let me get into what that looked like. So if you look in the corner of your screen there on the right, that's one of my colleagues looking cocky when he first got into Harvard Business School. And so he and I got together and we were talking, this was back when we were both at Google, and we did this study where we interviewed about 700 executives, right? And we wanted to figure out where their challenges were, where they struggled when it came to social media, right? And what we found out, and these were people at Oracle, at Microsoft, at McKinsey, Deloitte, et cetera. And what we found out was we could classify these folks into generally 3 different groups, and you might be able to relate to one of them yourselves, one or more of these groups. The first group were individuals that didn't quite know what to post. They were risk averse. And there's always these stories in the news about an employee getting fired for posting the wrong thing on social media, right? So they didn't know what to post, how to post. They thought they might get fired from their job. It could cost them opportunities, et cetera. So they stayed off of social media. The second group, which is the sort of the fat part of the curve, were folks that understood the idea of what it means to grow your brand, grow your credibility, increase your influence, and basically position yourself as a thought leader in the marketplace, but they simply didn't have the ability to be consistent, right? They didn't have, they'd be on social media or LinkedIn, posting content, engaging with people for a week or two, and then they disappear. And unfortunately, when you're not consistent, it's really hard to build a brand around what your expertise are. It's really hard to generate any sort of inbound leads or engagement when you're sort of sporadically engaged with your audience. We all see people on LinkedIn who only reach out to us when they need something, and they're not really positioning themselves as a resource, right, to others. They're just posting things every once in a while, and that is really quite a turnoff for the people that they're connected to. The other thing that we saw were folks that were overactive on LinkedIn, meaning they were posting content all the time. And that it was also a huge turnoff for a lot of the folks that they were connected to. Their audience experiences what we later termed content fatigue. So that's that person that you always see on LinkedIn posting something that's self-serving, right? And so what we ultimately found out was what the right amount of content to be posting is, the right times, the right days, and the best ways to get engagement, right? So I'm going to go over that a little bit later as well. Ultimately, through this process, I'm just going to sidestep into a quick story here and how it related to how we and ultimately came up with sort of some of the best practices that we learned the hard way. So I was flying to India with my wife, and I'm a tech guy, and so stereotypical tech guy, I dress like a dork most of the time. And so my wife handed me a book on this 8-hour or 18-hour flight, and it was this book, Genuine Authentic, the story of Ralph Lauren, right? And one of the lines in that book was, your clothes are an introduction to who you are before people meet you. And she thought that would be important for me to really grasp. And ultimately, I took something else away from it. Your professional social media presence is an introduction to who you are before people meet you now. So everything from your profile photo to your background and in addition to your summary, all those things very quickly when people are introduced to you via email, the first thing that they do is they oftentimes look you up, right? And so depending on how you want to position yourself, that's how you want the copy to be on your LinkedIn profile. Some folks are very, very formal in how they present themselves. Some folks are very informal and casual. And so you want to think about, based on your background and based on what you do, what the best persona is for you to project on your profile. A lot of times, with the executives that we work with, a lot of folks in private equity, et cetera, they historically used to present themselves in a very static kind of way. This is my background. This is where I went to school. I've got a 2.0 GPA, et cetera, et cetera. And the important thing to understand is that these days, it's much more important to understand that your profiles should be a conversation starter, right? They should be warm, they should be engaging, they shouldn't prevent someone from feeling comfortable reaching out to you. A lot of us generate revenue by virtue of building and growing relationships, right? And there's this air about a lot of folks on LinkedIn where they've got these sort of almost semi-intimidating profiles, and it prevents people from wanting to reach out to them. So those are some topics that are a little bit more advanced that we can get into. And like I said, I'm not sure if I said this earlier, but if you've got questions for me or comments, not only at the end of the webinar, but you can certainly email me at any time and we can dive down. Everyone usually has, their own unique objectives and their own unique challenges. So by no means am I wanting to give you sort of this that one size fits all type of a view, but certainly reach out to me when you've got questions, okay? About that earlier $260,000 engagement that I got. So way back in the day when I first left Google, I started a performance marketing agency. And at the time, the general logic was you've got to be on every single social platform, and you've got to be posting, different content to each of those social platforms, and you've got to be, talking about everything that you do, and you got to sell, and you got to do all these things, and that was really not my personality at all. It's very difficult for me to get out there and have this sort of promotional nature and have these calls to action and all these types of things that were at the time considered, the thing to do. For me, I had to focus on where my audience was. It made absolutely no sense for me to be on Instagram or Snapchat. The bulk of our audience was on LinkedIn. The bulk of our clients that I wanted to go after were on LinkedIn. And so that's where I focused, because that's where I could, as one person at the time, I couldn't be on that many platforms realistically, providing any real value, at least. It would be the equivalent of potentially spamming everyone. And so the other thing when I talked to folks when I was first starting was, you've got to get out there and show your value. Well, there's different ways to do that. I see people on LinkedIn all the time talking about how they've got a great home loan or a great insurance package, and that's literally all they ever post. And that's not necessarily, like in real life, you can't do that as a person. If you walk into a room every time, there's a gathering or a networking event, and you're just, constantly going on and on about what you do, not a lot of people are going to want to engage with you. And it's similar when you're online. There's no difference. So you've got to be very authentic to who you are. And the best way to do that is by showcasing your knowledge to your audience. So the best way to do that is, if you're very skilled in a particular area, showcase some of that research, showcase some of the content from what you've learned, whether it's video, whether it's posting content every few weeks or every few days. Any content that gets people engaged and gets people interested in your leadership and your insight is important. The other thing that for me was eye-opening was, I initially thought that you had to go really strong on LinkedIn and always be closing or always be aggressively selling, and that's really not. At least with the audience that I was working with, which were higher level marketing executives, it simply didn't work, right? Being sincere, being who you are in real life is what gets those same results online. And I think that is a nuance that some folks feel they can hide behind a screen or hide behind their social media. So the recap there is, focus on the platform which makes the most sense for you. In a lot of cases, it's going to be LinkedIn, maybe a little bit of YouTube, right? And then ultimately, make sure that you position yourself as a resource and be sincere, be who you really are, right? So going back to my earlier example of the executive who was spending 4 hours a day stalking everyone that he'd ever met online, as I saw my own LinkedIn presence grow and I started getting messages and I started getting people reaching out to me nearly every day. One of the things that naturally happens when you start getting a lot of interaction, a lot of profile views, is you start becoming a little obsessed. So I was checking LinkedIn multiple times a day, getting a little narcissistic, really thinking about whose invites I was going to accept, and not accept. So try to resist the temptation to do that. Really view it as a tool. Focus on lead generation and engagement, right?
Hit your phone. We have a question from the audience.
Sure.
Valerie asks, does the content that you post need to be your own to be effective, or does simply sharing articles of interest work?
Really brilliant question, and I can probably talk on that subject for an hour, which I won't do. We've done a lot of research around this internally at Roosterly, and one of the things that we found is historically a lot of coaches and consultants had heard that, look, you've got to be blogging, you've got to be writing articles. And to do that in any meaningful way, the amount of resources that you have to dedicate to that are quite a lot. It's very challenging to be publishing 4 articles a week or even 2 articles a week. In some cases, putting out one piece of really good content a month is a big deal. So what we've found, and this is going to be a little bit of a shocker for some folks, is oftentimes the folks that you're connected to on LinkedIn, even if you post a piece of curated content, meaning let's say you found something on Harvard Business Review or Wall Street Journal or any number of other publications that were topical to your expertise, and you shared that, most people, I would say it was about 54%, will read just the headline and decide whether to like it or not. Many people do not actually click through and read the article. They see that you posted it, you're their friend, they like you, they trust you, and they see this, this article from Forbes or HBR, and they'll say, oh, okay, I'm going to click through and read that. So if you add your commentary to it, right? If you add what we call a snippet, maybe 2 to 3 sentences summarizing it, that adds value because your audience, they see it as, okay, he or she, Valerie read this article, she liked the article, and these are her 2 cents around this article. That's sufficient. And that's something that you can continue to do throughout the week, throughout the month. And that does add value. So the short answer is no, it does not need to be your own content. The brands that these publications that are well regarded, they have a halo effect. So if you post content from some of these well-known publications, your audience will know, wow, okay, she's well read, she's reading this content, she's up to date, and that's all they need, right? That, in addition to your sort of opinion around that article, does a lot. And I can continue to talk more about that, but I'm worried about running out of time. Email me and we can chat more. I can talk about this stuff all day. So the other thing that I wanted to be careful in sharing was I was doing, initially when I began to be active on social media, I began chasing clients. Right. So I would be messaging folks, hey, I saw your LinkedIn profile, I'd love to chat with you. When do you have time? And I'd go into this long spiel about what my company did. And guess what? Nobody cares about what you do. Everyone's busy. Nobody has time. Instead, turn it around to how you can help them. Right. Make it about them. And when you begin doing that in your content, in your message, I mean, as early as yesterday, I received a message from, I get a lot of invites now because everyone wants me to write about them in Forbes magazine, and I can help with that, certainly. But they go into the story with just after saying hello, just after inviting me to their network, they go in this long paragraph about what they do. And that's not the way you're going to attract people. So when you make it about them, right, and less about what you do, you'll start seeing people reaching out to you. And that's the position that you want to be in. We're all very busy. Oftentimes we're understaffed, right? A lot of times we're an army of one, and spending your days messaging people on LinkedIn and trying to generate leads that way is not going to allow you to scale your consulting practice. It's not going to allow you to generate the type of income consistently that you want. You want to spend your time efficiently, right? You can do that by posting good content that engages people. Got another question? Let me read it. Okay. I just transitioned after 45-year career in public affairs, from looking for a job as an employee to PR consulting. Any best practices for high-level changes I should make to my LinkedIn? So if it's all right, what I'd like to do is I can't look at your LinkedIn right now, but if you want to email me your profile, I'd be happy to take a look at it and suggest some changes that you can make. And we can even schedule a call. I love doing that stuff. Congrats on a 45-year career, though. Awesome. Let's see. So here's an example. Now, so I currently have about 17,000 connections. Some of them are from third world countries, and they've got some great prize for me if I send them, $45,000 or something. So think about the folks that you want to connect with. That's a side thing. We all get those sort of spam emails and spam connections. So I mean that jokingly, but a lot of times when you post quality content, you have folks reaching out to you that are great to work with. So I posted some content and I got an invite from Joshua Albanese. He's a Chicago headshot photographer, and he wanted to give us a free headshots to our whole team. And these are the types of relationships that so I invited him over to our office, and he got a lay of the land. He took pictures of all of us, and it was complimentary, and we gave him a shout out on our social media, and he ended up generating a lot of business from that. So that's that sort of small community neighborhood of contacts that you can build. And I probably saved, I don't know, probably $2,000 from building connections like that, right? And in exchange for his headshots, we promoted him a little bit on social media. So it works out really well if you can use it efficiently, right? So think about that. Connect in a meaningful way, and it's so important. And I can't say this enough. On social media, we tend to have, and I use the word persona a lot, but we have this sort of aura about us that doesn't always reflect who we really are, right? And sometimes you've got to take away that sort of veneer of formality to really make strong connections. It's a little bit hard to do at first. And I want you to sort of fight the urge to be overly formal on your social media and on your LinkedIn, and just get comfortable with interacting with people in general. That was hard for me because I am not necessarily the most social guy. Tend to be a bit of an introvert. So for maybe a lot of you, it might be much more, much less of an arduous journey than it was for me.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you suggest people have a professional headshot on their LinkedIn?
Yeah, definitely. So what I can say, it depends on your background, right? So, the private equity folks and the legal folks that I work with, they all wear suits and ties, and they've got this very sort of high school yearbooky background. And that's okay if you're wanting to present that very buttoned up vibe. We at Roosterly, if you look at some of the folks that work for us, it's a very sort of casual vibe, and that's what we want to sort of reflect that. So I do think spending a little bit of money on a headshot, but it's got to be the right headshot, right? It has to sort of reflect your brand, who you are, how you position yourself in the marketplace. If you're in finance, you're probably going to want something to be a little bit more formal. If you're in marketing, you can have that sort of geeky, you can wear the glasses and then the turtleneck in the background or whatever. But okay, let's talk about something a lot of people don't know, and that's around what type of content performs well. Um, so we looked at this quite a bit and we measured it quite a bit. And the best way to break it down is an 80-20 rule. What I mean when I say that, and the best way to share it with you is via an analogy, right? So we work with this, one of our clients is a law firm. They've got about 80 lawyers, right? They all do social media. We manage content for all their attorneys. And one of the attorneys, he's a partner, Yale Law School, very smart guy. He's a tax lawyer. And so initially he was sharing content around tax law. Well, guess what? His audience, the folks that he works with, they already know that he's a brilliant lawyer, right? They're not going to read content around tax law, right? What they want to read about, they already know he's very smart. So what we instructed, or the editorial calendar that we put together for him was more around showcasing who he is as a person. So he collects, very expensive tequila. So, he travels around the world. He does all these cool things. And so 20% of his content is related to what he does outside of work. And the reason for that is we want him to appear as a whole person, someone that people can relate to. It's the equivalent of if I met you at a Starbucks and this was our first meeting, and all I talked about was social media and algorithms for literally that 60 minutes. You'd say, wow, Irfan's kind of one-dimensional and he's kind of a dork. I don't know if I want to work with him. However, if we connect on something that we both like, something that we both can relate to, that's really where the foundation of a business relationship can start, right? So that's what we like to do. 20% of that content that we're pumping out for folks, or what we would recommend that you do if you're going to do this yourself, is to be about the things that matter to you. Maybe it's, a nonprofit that you work with. Maybe it's the trip that you took to Jamaica, whatever those things are. The key is consistency also. A lot of folks post content around a million different things. Well, guess what that means for your brand? It gets diluted, right? So people really don't know what you're about. So you generally want to have 2 or 3 things that you're consistently posting content around, right? In addition to that 20% that's outside of your work silo, right? And ultimately, there's a hack that I can share to get meetings really quickly. I don't think I have time to explain it in detail, but if you email me, I can take it on a case-by-case basis and share with you, if you're looking to get some inbound meetings quickly, what are some things that you can do, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. So let me skip that slide. So when you think about the content that you post, and this is to I think Valerie's question earlier, where you get that content creates a halo effect around who you are, okay? Or think about it like this. So there's this physical attractiveness stereotype. Attractive people are perceived to be smarter, funnier, and more likable than less attractive people. So I guess that means I'm screwed. No, I'm kidding. So when you think about your content, think about where you're getting it from. Is it a reliable publication? Is it a place that's got, journalistic standards? And if it does, then more people associate with you with reading publications that are actually high quality, right? If you're posting content from TMZ or some blog that's unknown, it's not going to do you any favors. Post content that creates a halo effect around who you are. And you do that by focusing, if you're curating content, by focusing on getting your content from reputable publications. And that goes to my earlier point where you can read the content, add your own opinion around it, and then share it, okay?
There's a comment from one of our listeners, and I'm going to pose this as a question to you after. But Mike says, consulting agencies contact me quite often, sometimes with a position to fill. I respond to them and follow up only to never hear back. I feel like they are building up their database and wasting my time. Do you have any advice for how to sort of see through when those are like more automated messages, or when it is worth circling back with some of those random messages that you get on LinkedIn?
Gosh, yeah. And that's, unfortunately, so I feel your pain. I share that same experience. What I would do, and so this is a practice that I feel like has only increased over the last 18 months, whether those messages are automated or you've got some virtual assistant that's just pumping out these sorts of outbound messages. You're right, though. They are sort of designed and oftentimes to build a list or build a database for whoever's contacting you. What I generally do is I look at where that person's located, right? If they're in the continental US, number one, and if it does not seem like a fake profile. So if it's a real photo, they actually are connected to people and they have some sort of, if their title is one that looks real or looks like they've been there for a while, then I'll take the time to connect. And I operate by virtue of the volume of messages that I get, I had to really create a structure around how I dealt with them. So I've got time blocked off on my calendar once a week on a Friday, where at the end of the day, I'll spend a chunk of time, sometimes an hour, sometimes maybe a little bit longer, either blocking the contacts that I think are spam or responding to the ones that feel like they're real. So if you segment your time and operate it in a structured way and just look out for some key elements, like whether or not the profile is real and then they're somebody who's got some stature around them, you can handle that efficiently. Okay, let's see, another question. Do you have any recommendations on a business versus personal page on LinkedIn? So great question. If you think back to when these platforms were created, it was really meant as a way for individuals to connect and engage with other individuals. And that still holds true today. So if you've got a consulting company of one, you can certainly create a business page. That said, business pages overall get a fraction of the engagement and interaction that a personal profile does, right? So my recommendation is, if you are a smaller business, if you're one person, you can stick with a personal LinkedIn profile and be fine, right? Hope that answers the question. Let's see. Oh, okay, gosh. So I like movies from the 80s. That's why I've got that Michael J. Fox poster there. But here's a couple things on the hard way to maneuver through LinkedIn, or what a lot of people do, have done for the past several years. They research their connections and they prospect for 1 or 2 hours. They find what type of content that their audience is engaging with, and they spend a couple hours there. They research the type of content that they should be posting. They engage with their connections one-on-one. They spend 3 or 4 hours doing that. They spend more time finding content. They post content. They repeat that process, and then they're consistently doing that throughout the week. Or the alternative is they hire someone for $750 a month. I've seen folks pay as much as $3,200 per month for somebody to do all of that stuff for them. And that results in about 3 to 10 hours a week if you're doing that type of work yourself. A lot of us don't have 10 hours a week to dedicate to this because we're busy actually doing work. So think about efficient ways to do that I can share with you. Another real quick thing, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to run through some of these core things quickly. What is bad content? So we talked about this earlier, but bad content does not position you as a resource, right? Bad content only talks about you and how great you are and your company and how smart you are. It doesn't take into account your audience. Most people simply do not pay attention to the needs of their audience because they're so focused on themselves. Don't make that mistake. Good content. It's human, it's relatable. This is a picture of one of our clients. She's a CEO of the Inc. 500 company, but look at it from the perspective of growing the people in your audience, helping them. Think of yourself as a mentor. You spent so many years learning your craft. You spent so many years becoming an expert at what you do. That's valuable, and you underestimate that a lot. Don't fall into the trap of being insecure about that. Share all the cool things that you've learned, and you will find that you'll have people reaching out to you out of the woodwork, and be confident about that. What's the benefit? So look, a lot of folks think about social media as like, oh gosh, it's just one of those things that I have to do. So here's an example of one of our clients who actually generated leads and generated clients. And this is an example of something that we posted for her, right? It was from Forbes magazine, what most effective leaders show up with these 4 things every day. The most effective things that leaders show up with every day to work. And she got a number of people that reached out to her. And one of those folks that reached out to her was later became a client. And so think about this as a conversation catalyst, right? And if you do think about it as a way to start a conversation, you'll end up doing really well. That's the benefit. It's hard to put like a quantifiable ROI around it in that way, but think about it as conversations and the ability to have conversations. And this is an example of something that we got. So I had posted something on social media, and the individual, her name was Andrea, she looked up my email, and she sent me an email saying, hey, we'd love to be featured in Forbes magazine or CIO with a write-up about our company. Is that something that you can help us with? And I said, absolutely, I'd love to. And that ended up becoming a 12-month engagement. So really cool stuff there, and how this starts. So who does this work for? So this works for people in accounting, HR, finance, operations, coaches, enterprise sales, anywhere where relationships matter in terms of driving revenue, right? A lot of us have really long sales cycles, and relationships can help speed those up. The key is research the content, consider your audience, schedule your posts, and be consistent, right? Whether you're trying to lose 20 pounds and get in shape, you've got to go to the gym, not just on the weekend one time. You got to go every single week, multiple days. It's the same thing with building your brand and building presence around who you are and generating revenue. Got a question? Okay, let's see. I am shifting my practice into a new direction. What can I do to use the old brand to help me transition into a new one? Gosh, it depends how much of a departure that is. And I would need to know more about your old brand. So this is a very sort of case by case type of thing. I don't want to give you a sort of a one-off general answer, because it would just kind of I would feel like I was just being flippant and not paying very much attention to it. So
I could jump in here.
Yeah, do you mind?
We have another LinkedIn expert that we work with. His name is Wayne Breitbarth, and he does one-on-one strategy sessions with people for their business and their personal profile on LinkedIn. So if you go to patinanation.com, and let me see here, patinanation.com, marketing tools and resources, and then LinkedIn marketing. You can find more information on Roosterly and Wayne, but you can schedule time to talk with Wayne, and he'll spend an hour walking through strategy for you.
Gosh, okay, next question. LinkedIn Premium versus Basic. So, gosh, LinkedIn Premium is a little pricey for at least the value that I've gotten from it. So I use LinkedIn Basic most of the time if we're doing a campaign and we'll sometimes register for Sales Navigator for 2 or 3 months, maybe. But I'm against paying for something that I feel should be free for the most part. So I think LinkedIn Basic, without paying for it, has all the value that you need. Okay. So typically just a little bit about Roosterly, we manage social media profiles for a lot of coaches and consultants. We get you ranked very quickly among the top 4% of your connections or more. So certainly if you need help, we can manage this entire process for you. So feel free to reach out to me. We can help you do that. If your slide, clearly some typos on it, but we've got a special offer for Patina Nation members, I think, where you can sign up for free. So you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to the folks at Patina. I think they've got a special link where you can do that, right, Jesse?
Yeah, in today's post-event email, you'll receive a survey, but then also more information on how to get connected with Roosterly and automate some of your LinkedIn content.
Perfect. Questions, comments, belly aches, concerns? I hope you guys found that valuable. Radio silence, apparently.
Oh, no, we got some questions rolling in here.
All right, good.
All right. One anonymous attendee says, how do I convert searches into contacts? People search my profile but don't follow through.
Oh, yeah, so that's easy. So if you go into your who's viewed my profile, I want to make sure that I understand the question right. But so if you go into who's viewed my profile in LinkedIn, you can send an invite to each of those individuals and connect with them.
Awesome. Then, okay, 1 second.
And you should do that. You should basically make that like a weekly practice. If the person that's been viewing your profile is somebody that you think you could further a relationship with, it does not hurt to be proactive, pardon me, and reach out to them.
Awesome. Any more questions, folks? Okay, here's one. I heard content needs to be original, otherwise Google will bury it in search results. Do you have any comment in regards to using curated content? Yeah,
so that is when you're mixing two different things. So LinkedIn is its own platform, okay? The results on LinkedIn, when you're posting content to LinkedIn, they're not indexed in Google search results at all. Okay, so that's the first major thing. If you are wanting to index content on Google, then what you're going to be doing is writing original content on a blog. That is two completely different platforms, two completely different environments.
Okay, Colin has a question. Any specific tips for a 60-plus-year-old seeking new connections and engagements?
Gosh, in that scenario, I think the best thing to do would be to actually, in that particular scenario, purchase LinkedIn Premium for a few months, amp up your profile, good photo, build a good summary, headline, all that stuff that focuses on your background experience, and you'll actually start seeing connections roll in automatically. You got to make sure that your settings are set to publicly viewable profile and a few other things. But yeah, it's not, don't feel like you should not feel overwhelmed. That's not a hard challenge to overcome.
Valerie asks, how frequently should we post to avoid the nuance factor?
Oh yeah. So we did a lot of research around this as well. And for folks in professional services, right? So coaches, consultants, lawyers, accountants, et cetera, we found that the optimum amount of content per month is about 16 posts per month. So about 4 per week. And a lot of people who are not active very much historically feel like that's almost too much to get started with. So I would say at the very minimum, you should be doing about 2 posts per week. And then as you become more comfortable, you start getting more engagement, amp it up to about 4 posts per week, and you should be good with that. Any more than that, it could be overwhelming to your audience.
We have a comment.
Okay.
Kevin says, that's me, almost 62, definitely invest in premium for several months.
Awesome.
Well, if nobody has any more questions for Irfan today, watch your email. You'll receive an email in the next 30 minutes. Bill asks, what do you think are the best times to post?
Sure. So we see right now a couple of different spikes. We see a spike at around 10 a.m., right? That's usually around the time when people take their first break in the office and they jump on LinkedIn for a bit. We see it being really dead around lunch, between like 11:30 to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock is pretty dead. And then we see another big spike right before dinner time and after dinner time, which is strange. So around 7 p.m., you'll see a nice little spike as well. But guess what? Once people know this, that's going to change, because once people begin doing everything that's working, it's hard to break through that noise. Hope that makes sense.
Awesome. And one of the things that we said we would do is share Irfan's email one more time before this ended. So Irfan, do you want to?
Yeah, so it's Irfan@roosterly.com. So that's IRF like Frank, AN at Roosterly, like the animal, LY.com.
All right. Hubert asks, what's a good way to drive traffic to content you're writing on LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn, certainly share it on LinkedIn, share it on other social platforms. So another concept that I can get into more is the practice of using pods. So pods are where you have a close group of your network or your friends share your content for you. And ultimately you can build a small little community that shares each other's content. And that actually is a really effective way, sometimes controversial way, but effective way to get a lot of interaction and a lot of views very quickly.
Howard asks, are there any bad days to post?
So Saturday is Saturday and Sundays aren't necessarily great days. We see a lot of spikes around Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are good. Fridays are sometimes a little slow, certainly around holiday weekends are certainly slow, but yeah.
We have two people asking about the hack concept.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that more?
So basically, there are tools that can sit on top of LinkedIn, right? If you use a Chrome browser, so Google Chrome, there's a tool called Scrap, SKRAPP.io, okay? And what Scrap does, it sits on top of your browser, and as you're researching on LinkedIn, going through profiles, it will extract the emails of the individuals whose profiles you're looking at, and it'll download them into a Google spreadsheet. And you can very quickly spend 15, 20 minutes and email them. And so our team utilizes that practice. And again, we generate easily, in our salespeople case, 5 to 10 appointments a week. It's a little bit, I wish I had a visual to share with you, but that's one way to do it.
Great. And I think Dave from our team is looking up the link right now to share
Okay.
with you all.
And they've got different packages. You can export about 1,000 email contacts for next to nothing. SKRAPP.io. It's the concept of extracting, instead of buying an email list, extracting it from LinkedIn and utilizing what we call a cold email strategy to reach out to people and book appointments.
Well, Irfan, thanks so much for joining today. Again, Patina Nation members, watch your email. You'll have a link to a survey and then more information about Roosterly and their automated LinkedIn content. Thanks again for joining us, and we're glad that you could make it.
Thanks, everyone.
This has been a presentation of the Patina Nation. To watch more content like this or for more information, please visit us online at www.patinanation.com.